29th of January, the fourth Sunday in Ordinary Time. Sermon on Micah chapter 6 verses 1 to 8, Psalm 15, 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 18 to 31, and Matthew chapter 5 verses 1 to 12. When Jesus preached his Sermon on the Mount and listed the Beatitudes, he was setting a far higher bar than did the Ten Commandments. He established the value not of rules but of qualities, such as humility, mercy, purity, peace, and righteousness, and also spoke of the blessings to come on the grieving and the persecuted. However, these factors were not foreign to the Hebrew Scriptures, not unknown among the pages of the Old Testament. We see this very clearly in our reading from Micah. Micah was writing, like many of the other prophets, before the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. At that time, the nation of Judah was in an apostate condition, unfaithful to the Lord, exploiting the poor, giving only token service. In our passage, Micah speaks on God's behalf, setting out an accusation against his people. He reminds them that it was the Lord himself who brought them out of slavery in Egypt many generations before. Under the leadership of Moses, their ancestors had witnessed many acts of righteousness, mercy, and deliverance performed by the Lord on their behalf. And yet, they see their service of God as an unwelcome burden. Micah suggests what might be running through the minds of the accused. Should they sacrifice more lavish burnt offerings, even offer their firstborn as if the Lord should ever require such a sacrifice? Then comes the Lord's answer. This is what he asks of them: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with their God. Justice, mercy, humility. What wonderful qualities for any people, Jews, Gentiles, Christians, anyone. What wonderful qualities to cultivate within ourselves and to display to others. Those few words have pulled me up short on a few occasions when I had intended to erupt into what I felt was righteous wrath. Is it just? Is it merciful? Does it display humility? According to Micah's prophecy, those three qualities are worth far more to God than thousands of sacrificed rams, 10,000 rivers of oil, or any other offering. There's a similar, though rather longer, list of qualities in Psalm 15. The question is asked, Lord, who may dwell in your sanctuary? Who may live on your holy hill? This is believed to be a psalm of David, who greatly valued his relationship with God and hoped to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The answer to the question is that it is the one who is blameless, righteous, and truthful, who slanders no one, honours the God-fearing, lends freely, and maintains justice for the innocent. I know someone whose future epitaph that could be. Sadly, it's not likely to be mine, but I'm working on it. Of course, all this sounds as if it will be a huge effort to get into heaven, to enter his sanctuary. These are all wonderful qualities, but ultimately, our righteousness is given us by God's grace through the blood of Jesus. Humans often fail, even with the best of intentions, but God meets us in our weaknesses. However, especially in our churches, It helps if qualities of truthfulness, mercy, righteousness, and open-handedness abound, together with true humility. In Paul's letter to the church in Corinth, he was having to deal with a number of situations where status-conscious rivalry, greed, immorality, idolatry, one-upmanship, and plain snobbery were evident. Not much humility there. In the passage we're considering, Paul is trying to cut them down to size and remind them to be humble. He reminds them, first of all, of the power of the gospel of Christ, which causes all human achievement to pale into insignificance. Even the wisest of men is foolish in comparison to God. The cross of Christ seemed like something contemptible, and his followers fools to those who didn't believe. But to Christians, it is the ultimate proof of God's wisdom and power. Paul reminds the Corinthians that not many of them were wise, influential, or of noble birth. But anyway, those qualities are of no value to God. He chooses what might seem weak, lowly, or despised to the worldly, but in him they are endowed with righteousness, holiness, and salvation. Therefore, all they have is from God, so they have no need to boast and nothing to boast about. Let us now return to the Beatitudes. These are not so much pointers to get us into heaven, but qualities that will enrich our lives, bless our church communities, give deep spiritual joy and ultimate well-being. This is how Christians should live their lives. First, Jesus pronounces blessing on those who are poor in spirit. That doesn't sound like much of a quality to cultivate, but it means to be spiritually aware, to be aware of our needs, not focusing on being self-sufficient or spiritually proud. That's important. I've been a member of several churches that displayed spiritual pride, seeking to do better than neighbouring churches or to make more of a display of their success. Those are not happy churches to be part of. In contrast, the reward for valuing our spiritual lives is that ours will be the kingdom of heaven, because by putting on worldly things first, we show ourselves ready and willing to enter the kingdom. Receiving blessing because we mourn also sounds a bit negative. But for those who believe in God's mercy and who have faith in the resurrection, there is great comfort in the face of loss and death. Many of us have had to put that to the test. Death is always a great sadness, but it is so much easier to face with our Christian beliefs in place and with the simple comfort that God can give us. Mourning can be coming alongside others also at times of grief or stress. We can feel God's blessing when our hearts overflow with compassion for the suffering of others. The meek will inherit the earth. I don't much like the sound of the word meek. It rhymes with weak, and it sounds ineffectual and wishy-washy. Is that what inheritors of the kingdom will be like? Meek is in the NIV translation. The Good News Bible has humble. That's better and fits with what Micah said in his prophecy. But I think the Message has the best rendition. It says, "You're blessed when you're content with just who you are." That sounds like the sort of person I'd be happy with in eternity. And it shows why people like that will inherit the earth. For the Message continues, "That's when you find yourselves the proud owners of everything that can't be bought." In other words, these are people who have stopped striving after worldly things and have set their hearts on eternity. They've nothing to lose because all that they have is of lasting value. Next, we have those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. no doubt their own besides what they hope to find in this world. And the merciful, both those groups of people receive back what they give out. And the pure in heart will see God. The Message helps again here. It says, you're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and heart, put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. The peacemakers will be called sons of God. They find they are in God's family. That's the Message again. Finally, we have the surprising blessing on those who are persecuted and slandered for their faith. We don't think of persecution as a blessing. Quite the reverse, in fact. But Jesus says that the kingdom is theirs already. Not only are they blessed, they should rejoice and be glad to be so dishonoured, because their eternal reward will be great, just as God rewarded the faithful prophets in the past. That's not to say, of course, that we should treat the persecuted in a cavalier way. It's great to hear that you're being persecuted. Keep it up. The scriptures make clear that we have a responsibility towards our Christian brothers and sisters, and we should try to relieve suffering caused by persecution if at all possible. However, campaigning against the persecution of Christians is another matter. In the early church, Christians bore much greater persecution than any of us is likely to face. And in the West, at least, it is unfortunate when Christian groups take legal action against minor acts of what they see as persecution, such as not being allowed to wear a cross at work, or having to accept a transgender colleague, as if such a situation could remotely be called persecution. A legal case in 2013 involving a nurse banned from wearing a cross in her hospital was highlighted by George Carey, the then Bishop of Canterbury, who declared his support for the case and others, issuing a statement on Easter Day, a day when most Christians focus on the resurrection. Describing UK Christians as persecuted, he drew sharp negative reactions from both secular and Christian groups. Christians in the media rejected his comments for not differentiating between discrimination and persecution. And they stated that persecution is an entirely inappropriate term to use in the context of the UK. How wonderful it would be if Christians could hit the headlines for stating that they are happy to be inconvenienced for the sake of their faith. After all, we're not required to wear a cross or anything else in order to follow our faith. And we should remember that the early church flourished and grew in the face of very, very severe persecution. None of the blessings in Jesus' sermon, nor the counsel in the other scriptures we have considered, is the way into heaven. Our place in heaven is assured because Jesus died for us. But the qualities revealed in these passages will make our lives as Christians feel worthwhile and fulfilling. They will give us joy far different from worldly happiness, and they will enable us to reach out to others, revealing God's love to them and bringing them also into his kingdom.